Hello, friends, and welcome to the Voices of MCC podcast. Our hope is that you will be encouraged in your faith as you hear how MCC beliefs and practices are fleshed out in the daily lives of the members of our fellowship and some of those from our fellowship who are no longer a part directly of our fellowship in Kansas City, but have moved to other locations. And some of those folks include Kelly and Andrea Huerter with us today on the Voices of MCC podcast. I have been anticipating this conversation since we lined it up a few weeks ago. And the date is important, as we will be discussing shortly here. We're recording on February 10th. And I'm excited to think about this last year, dating back to February 9th and forward for the Huerters. Kelly and Andrea, welcome. You have been a part of my life and of MCC for several years. Catch us up. When did you first begin attending MCC? Kelly, catch us up.
Yeah, hello. We started attending MCC in about Easter time of 2011. We were going to MCC for about a year and a half before we moved to China in the fall of 2012. And we spent 2 years in China. MCC was our sending church. As we lived in China for 2 years, we moved back to Kansas City in 2014. And then have been active members with MCC from moving back in 2014 all the way until February of 2020, basically. Yeah. So.
I recall with fondness Skype calls or whatever technology used to exist when you were serving in China, and we would Skype with you, our family, and sit and talk with you, just trying to catch up. You had been a part of MCC, as you said, about a year and a half, and the Lord called you to teach there at a university city there in China, and you taught English. And just recall with such fondness hearing of the Lord's work in your lives, stability and connection. And I just appreciate even still his work there. And then I recall those conversations when you thought, our time here for now is done and we're going to be headed home. And remember sitting in the fellowship hall at MCC with you shortly after you returned in 2014. I believe was it summer? Was that right?
Yeah, it would have been July, August 2014. Yeah.
Yes, I remember there greeting you in the fellowship hall, and we just sat and talked and caught up, and just such encouragement at that time for our church. Having you all back was just so rich, and settling right back into fellowship and encouragement in those years, 2014, 15, and the last several, helping and leading outreach and missions trips. Andrea, you had the privilege of coming back and your family here in Kansas City, mom and dad back here, and got to enjoy relationships with them these last several years. And just reflect on that for us. Coming back in 2014, being back in Kansas City, back around family, back at MCC.
Yeah, it was good being back, coming back in 2014, just really feeling the Lord calling us back during that time, specifically back to Kansas City, and that's where our family is. So getting to spend a good amount of time near them and growing in our relationship there. So definitely thankful for that with my family and not being too far from Kelly's family as well, everyone being within an hour's drive of each other.
Yes. And that family concept and connection is something we're going to be talking about here today some, and the value of family and support, learning from one another, and so forth. Well, many of our listeners here know of you from one of our leaders at MCC, Kelly, leading outreach, again, helping with missions trips to Croatia several times, little over a year ago to China again, to go back, visit some of the people that you knew there, and connect with them. And it was after that trip to China, or even before that a little bit, one of your trips to Croatia, I recall we met afterwards, sort of a debrief. And Kelly, you had made a comment to me. I think we were sitting at Panera on Markway there in Johnson Drive in Miriam. We were chatting, just reflecting, and you said, Andrea and I are the kind of people who can do this. We can do missions. We can do mission trips, and maybe the Lord is calling us back. And so this progresses to about a year and a half ago when you sensed specifically the Lord might be calling you to go back to China. Unpack that for us just a minute, Kelly.
Yeah, I do remember those conversations for sure, and just really recognizing that continual heart for the nations that the Lord blessed us with. And not only that, because I think we all should have that heart for the nations, but recognizing somewhat of a gifting and somewhat of a heart pull from the Lord, and being able to enter into relationships cross-culturally, to live in an environment that wasn't our own. And almost for others, I hear them talking and it would be uncomfortable, but for us it was enjoyable. It was opportunities that we saw to learn and to grow from different perspectives, and we really appreciated that. And so feeling like the Lord had placed it on our hearts that going overseas again was an opportunity that we should be pursuing. So we did go on that missions trip that MCC helped sponsor to visit our friends again in China, and American and Chinese friends, and just really feel like, yeah, there was a purpose for teachers at universities still, and a kingdom purpose that we could have present there. And so we felt like we were supposed to be going back at that point.
I remember that, and so we all started to make those preparations in the fall of 2019, and sort of started to think about this with you all, and you began to sell possessions, get your spiritual antennas up, or antennae, I'm not sure how I would say that in the plural, to get ready to go, and where you're going to live, and making connections. And I recall you were hoping to get permission from the government and get teaching positions, and all of that seemed to be underway. And you, several years ago, last January 2020, things coming together, getting ready to give your vehicle away and head out. And you left Kansas City. Andrea, what was the date that you left Kansas City, 2020?
We left February 1st. We went on a road trip to see some family and friends just before we were about to head out about a week later.
And so you were scheduled to fly out February 10th, is that right? And you were going to depart, Andrea, what is it, New Orleans you were going to fly out of?
Yeah, we had plans to visit friends in northern Florida. So then just a 3-hour drive from that is New Orleans. So they were going to take us there and see us off at the airport on February 9th that last year. Yeah.
And yes, February 9th, and then that changed. Yes. Andrea, what was that like? What information did you get? What comes to your mind when you think back to that date?
Yeah, so we found out that we weren't going to be able to go as planned it was at the very end of January, maybe like a couple days before February 1st. The school informed us that there is the coronavirus there, and their school wasn't going to be starting at the beginning of March as they anticipated. And so they said, just wait. And then we decided to go ahead and go on our road trip anyways, just to see family and friends. And we had that time available. We didn't know what the future was going to look like. And during that week trip, we got notice from the airlines that our flight was actually canceled as well. So that was more of a definite okay, not going anytime in the foreseeable weeks. And honestly, I felt a feeling of peace when the school canceled, when the school told us we couldn't come, and when the flights were canceled. It was a definite feeling of peace from the Lord, that this is good and this is okay, to just put this on hold for, we didn't know how long. Could have been weeks or months at that point.
Yes, and you were headed to China. Well, where did this all begin? China. This has been the epicenter. And so obviously that put such a different trajectory before you. The Lord seemed to be calling you. Things seemed to be clear. Our whole church was behind you. And now there's a stoppage, which there are many folks who are trying to do cross-cultural work, who the virus put a stop to it. And we had to rethink God's providence and what he's called us to and where we can be faithful at. So Kelly, catch us up. About February, looks like schools on lockdown, flights canceled, then things progress to not just international travel is halted, but life is starting to come to a halt in the United States there, February, March. How did the Lord direct you all during those days? You were sort of like pilgrims at that point. How did the Lord direct the pilgrims of Kelly and Andrea Huerter?
Yeah, so we came back from visiting our friends in Pensacola. So at this point, we had visited a few other friends, just family that we didn't have a chance or an opportunity to see before we left. So that time was there. But then in March, when the more lockdown came, we were with my parents. They are retired and live in Silver Lake, a smaller town outside of Topeka, and it just became obvious that this was the place that we were going to get to do our lockdown with my parents for 2.5 months there. And it was such a blessing to be able to be there in more of a rural, quiet environment, spending time with my parents who are believers, but also just being able to encourage each other to deeper in our faiths and just pursuing the Lord there together. And so that was really a blessing, just being able to be there while we waited, as we continued to wait, as we felt like at some point there was going to be a notification that we would be able to get to go to China at some point. So basically from mid-March to first week of June, that was our mindset, was just we're waiting until we could get to go. And a lot of the world was waiting with us and getting our lives back to normal at that point, it felt like. So we felt like a lot of people were experiencing the same things that we experienced, just we're waiting to go to China at that point.
And so this takes us to the first week of June. And since then, the Lord has sort of redirected and placed a different burden on your heart, but a burden away from China. Kelly, when was it along the way in 2020 that you all just had one of those moments where you looked at each other and just said, I just don't know if we're to go back. I don't know if the Lord has called us to keep waiting here and to go back. I think this is not what we're to do.
Yeah. So over this summer, June or July, it just kept on being more evident that the schools were not going to be opened. And so praying and talking with Andrea, it became clear that, they just weren't going to be open. So what were we supposed to do next? And so we felt like we had a contract with the school for 1 year. And so we reached out to the school mid-July and just said, I know we have a contract. A lot of this contract has already been broken because of the COVID. we're thinking we're needing to pursue full-time jobs here in the United States and not be living in this state of maybe in the future we'll get to go. And they were fully supportive and fully agreed with that, and we're happy more than anything else to be able to say yes. We have no hard feelings, no obligations on our end either. Continue on. And so that burden was lifted, and it just became evident that the Lord had us staying here in the United States for now.
So June, July, the Lord seems to have shifted your mindset that things are not what originally thought about. And this is something that we understand in God's providence. Sometimes the Lord will lead us in what we think is a very specific way. And it is in our thinking at that moment in our lives, because we are creatures dependent on time. We are creatures of chronology, and God is outside of time. God does not depend on anything. Therefore, he sees all of reality and all of history in one glance, so to speak. We see step at a time. And the Lord leads us in our finiteness, one step at a time, which we think is very specific, but it's actually, no, that's general preparation for something else. So the preparation that you did to get ready for China, well, this is actually preparation for something else. And it leads us to the next conversation point here. Andrea, along the way, June, July, things seem to be shifting in your minds and how the Lord is leading you. And you're now thinking of maybe domestic ideas and your own family. Catch us up on what that transition was like and how the Lord began to burden you for your own family, and not just extended family, but you and Kelly as parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. So definitely there was a shift in our vision for the near future, knowing that we couldn't prepare to do, and really going back to at least 2014, when the Lord had placed a burden on our hearts for orphan care and adoption. And at that time, we also felt all of a sudden a lot of fears. This had been something that had been on our minds and our hearts even since before marriage. But in 2014, he really placed that in front of us. We faced a lot of hesitation and fears that we wouldn't know how to be good parents. And so over those 6 years of being here in the States, wrestling with all of that, even thinking we'd go back to China. There's a woman there who takes care of foster children, that we could connect with her, kind of look more down that avenue in that way. That door closed. And then the door to China closed completely. And all of a sudden, that spring and early summer, the burden for adoption all of a sudden became peaceful. Something that had not had peace for many years. Maybe one of us felt peace and the other one wasn't ready, vice versa. The other one had peace and the other one was fearful. All of a sudden, in a very miraculous way, the Lord gave us both peace. We continued thinking about it, talking about it, and saw that this is something we need to seriously pursue and not hold off on any longer.
And thinking about that, I remember one time we met and talked about it, I think at the MBTS campus, sitting outside the student center there, and just thought about the Lord's leadership in your lives and what family life's like, what adoption is like, and your desires to maybe shift and focus on international adoption and connecting with the nations that way, and thinking about doing that here, and the need to connect with family perhaps more and learn about parenting more and more family connections. Kelly, that takes us to thinking about the move to Lawrence from Kansas City. Connect those dots for us.
Yeah. So as we were feeling that though plans for China were on hold, our plans for orphan care and thinking specifically about international adoption was still on our mind and on our hearts to do. And so we felt like we wanted to be closer to our family to be able to do this. Well, my brother and his wife with 4 boys live here in Lawrence, and I grew up respecting him and his wife and his marriage, and this last year has been able to see him with his boys and the blessing that is, and just knew that I wanted to be around him. We both did, that we wanted to be around my brother and my nephews and my sister-in-law in the pursuing of building our family. It's also advantageous as it's closer to my parents. It's like halfway between my parents and Andrea's parents. So grandparents could have more in the life, hopefully, but ultimately Lawrence, because of seeing who my brother and sister-in-law as parents and the nephews, the influence that they could have. So we weren't tied down by jobs. So that was one of the bigger decision points that helped us lead us to Lawrence.
And we talked about the benefit of family if you're going to adopt or foster, especially grandparents, but siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles can be so helpful. And I think that is going to be exciting for you. So let's get to it. What is on the horizon for the possibilities of adopting and internationally? What's the latest? Andrea, catch us up.
Well, in August 2020, we put in our application with Holt International. They have partnerships with many countries. We initially thought we'd apply with China since we have our connections with that country and the orphan situation there. They have some high financial requirements that we don't quite meet. So we looked around, and Vietnam was the country that stood out to us. So we've been in the process of that application for about 6 months now. We've completed our home study, and so that's sort of the stateside and agency approval of being able to be adoptive parents. Now we're on to the more the federal level, applying with USCIS to be approved as adoptive parents to an international child. And that could take a couple months at least. And then we'll move on to getting approved with Vietnam themselves to accept us as parents to adopt a child from their country. And then they will match us with a child.
What is on your mind? What has the Lord done to incline you toward Vietnam specifically?
We felt that Vietnam was, of the countries that Holt worked with, Vietnam seemed to be maybe the closest culturally or historically culturally with China. So that's helpful just with our experience in that part of the world. And also, Holt International has a great program within Vietnam where their priority and their focus is keeping birth families together. And that's important to our hearts as well. And we know that's something that the domestic adoption and foster care system within America, that's the first priority, is keep birth families together. And so when we saw that, we just really respect that and hope that those families could stay together first. So that felt like a program that we could trust and go with.
And so there's a good bit of paperwork to do, funds that need to be raised. and along the way, the Lord preparing both of you. Are there any specific passages, Kelly, the Lord has used recently to encourage you in this waiting now for adoption, which may take months and it may stretch into the end of even 2021? Is there anything the Lord has given you to encourage you and help you endure as you wait on him for this next phase of his leadership?
The things that I have thought about and that I continue to go back to is in general, the Psalms have been very comforting this year. Andrea and I have had the opportunity to go through the book of Psalms together in our family worship time, and just really hearing those hearts and the cries out to the Lord have been great. And even there with the Psalm, with the tree by the river, and just really drawing our strength from the Lord as he is the living water, and knowing that I need to rest in him and seek him in that has been encouraging. One idea, I'm not sure, I heard it in a podcast that I was listening to about orphan care generally for the church. And it's a metaphor that they used, and like all metaphors, I'm sure it breaks down somewhere. But it was talking about how God is the father to the fatherless, that scripture reference to, and just recognizing that as the church is the bride of Jesus, what does that make our relationship to the orphans out there? And just somewhat of a motherly relationship should the church be to the orphans, and just really thinking about that idea of what a mother is, and as a church trying to do that for orphans, being there when they have their needs, meeting those needs, being there to connect with them, to comfort them, doing what we can to support them and show them the way of true life in Jesus. And so when I think about orphan care and the long wait that could happen before the adoption is final, I think about and plan those moments when I can share the gospel with someone in my home who doesn't know it, and it excites me and brings me joy.
Well, it excites us as well to think about God's work and the opportunities before you and his leadership with a specific organization, specific country. And now we can wait on him. And what we'll recognize is his unfolding leadership and what he has for us in the years to come. I'm just aware lately of, maybe it is in the shadow of COVID, maybe it's other circumstances of life, but how the Lord takes us along to what we think is something specific, and then there's actually more specificity to that. And when we look back, that's actually a general kind of call and so forth. So we hold you to the Lord now and hold you up and recognize that the specific, what seems specific now is a platform for what's to come. And we look forward to how he's training you and what is ahead. Give us, as we wrap up, one way that we could pray for each of you in the process of looking to foster and adopt, or rather just to adopt from Vietnam here in the months to come.
Yeah. First, I kind of want to comment on what you were saying there too, and just agreeing with you that it is amazing to see how God uses one situation that we think is we're going to China in this specific example, but how it really did prepare our hearts and prepare us for this process. It is very true. I want people to realize that process we went through to go to China wasn't in vain. It wasn't worthless. It has prepared us. It has brought us to this point, and we praise the Lord for that. But also, so at this point, I think continued prayers for us is continued patience in this process. We've been learning a lot about waiting, but that doesn't make it always easier. We just continue to learn more. So continued patience in this process would be helpful. And then just trusting God and providing all that we need, providing the time to get the paperwork done, the resources to be able to finance it. It's been amazing to see just how extra work has come up in different situations to be able to provide extra funding for this and other opportunities that we've had, and that we remember that as things continue to be progressing, that we need more in some areas, that we trust that he will provide in whatever ways that he chooses. Thanks,
Kelly. Andrea, how about for you?
I think for me, I would just agree with the part about trusting the Lord. This year has been such a huge journey of trusting him more in something that we were so fearful of, parenthood, thinking, can we be good parents or not? And having experienced the Lord provide strength and ability in so many other ways in our life in previous experiences, yet this one thing we were held up on. So just remembering that he is able to provide for what is needed for the things he calls us to, that he is strength in our weakness and that he will be glorified in our weakness. So just prayers that we would remain steadfast in trusting him, fixing our eyes on Christ only as we step forward, just one step at a time, and wherever he would take us with it and whatever he would use it for his glory.
We will pray those things for you. I've been reflecting lately just on the simplicity of the Lord's Prayer, and give us this day our daily bread. Israel in the wilderness, daily provisions is what the Lord had for them, and it's true for us as well. Paul referenced those ideas in 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, and the idea of the Lord's providence and the joy of partnership in giving and receiving. What an indescribable gift, he said, and that's what we will trust will happen with you. And folks, if they'd like to support you financially or in other ways, just get in touch with me and we can get you Kelly and Andrea's contact info and press on together from there. Well, this has been fun to catch up. We've had opportunities to talk some over the last several months, and it's always a joy. And now to open that conversation here to others, that's my goal in the Voices of MCC podcast, to keep folks connected and expand those conversations that sometimes I get, but I want others to hear about as well. So Kelly and Andrea, thank you for joining us. We look forward to the Lord's work in your lives. I want to say a special word of thanks also to Alex Volkman for his help in organizing and producing the podcasts, and Pastor Adam Anderson and Caleb Sheffield for their work in music on these podcasts. Until next time, friends, may the Lord bless you, and we will look forward to connecting again on the Voices of MCC podcast soon.